Today, every single Deepwoken dev gathered into one stream to talk about the future of the game. And for those of y'all who missed it, it was honestly one of the coolest things I've ever seen in this community. So today, I'll be telling you guys all about the main points and questions that were answered, and what the future of Deepwoken is going to look like coming up. And with Hallowtide coming soon, everyone wants to know about Hallowtide. And this is what the big dog Raguzer said.
So now we're working towards Hallowtide, and I kind of want Hallowtide to be a bit of a bigger update this year. So it's going to be your normal Hallowtide stuff, and I'd say at least like 2 of the other things on the bottom of the roadmap. So
as he said, Hallowtide is going to be a much bigger update this year compared to the last few. This is where an important note comes in that the weekly updates are not completely leaving us, and they will just be prioritized a little less so the devs have more time to work on these bigger updates like Hallowtide and Ceramide Hollow. Some people might like that, others won't, but I think the bigger updates are overall more fun to play, especially if things like the Authority Origin end up in production or coming into the game as time goes on. And back to Hallowtide, we are still going to get new weapons and features related to it, like all the ones we got from the last years, but there will be at least 2 of the other things on the Verse 3 roadmap being added at the same time or around the same time. This is the roadmap, by the way, for the ones who don't know what it looks like, and the ones he said are most likely to come out with Hallowtide would be the Iron Vow, Divergences, or the Ceramide Hollow. It's already almost halfway to Halloween, but Raguzer sounded pretty confident when he said that at least 2 of these would be added, so I'm guessing there's probably a lot of work being done or almost completed for now. Ceramide Hollow seemed pretty secret. They didn't really want to go over it too much. For Divergences, Aga showed this picture on the stream and showed what possible aspect evolutions would look like. And there's also some potential similarities to Rogue Lineage where things like Vampire and more unlockable things for your build could happen. These would overall be really cool, add more diversity to the game, overall just more healthy. I think everyone would like to see something around those areas being added. And then Iron Vow, which Raguzer was the most hyped about, was said to be a separate hardcore Deepwoken variant, similar to like an Iron Man of other games, if you guys know like what I'm talking about. Similar to like RuneScape Iron Man or maybe even Skyblock Iron Man. We don't really know crazy details right now, but Iron Vow will have unique bosses and unique builds, because the aim is to create things that can only be gained through Iron Vow, and that's what makes it a unique type of prog and actually worth it to do. Otherwise, you know, people would not really do it. And then moving past Hallowtide, the Divergences, and Iron Vow and all that stuff, they actually talked a ton about Layer 3, which I was personally surprised about. I thought they wanted to be a little bit more secret about that. But they also talked about the new combat, and I'm sure you guys remember how the entire combat system was reworked when Verse 2 was added, but Verse 3 won't have anything crazy like that. Rag talked about adding potential variations in attack speed, or any like special effects, and this would be through the work of charging attacks. But these are all rough ideas, nothing confirmed as of now, but just know that he's thinking about ways to, I guess, spice up the combat a little bit, which is always going to be pretty solid. I personally don't think the combat needs like a big old rework like Verse 2 had. I think it's pretty fine where it's at, but something to create new variations is always going to be solid, and obviously cool as hell. And they are also focusing on PvE combat as well, and most of y'all know that PvE right now is kind of just memorizing attack patterns over and over and over again. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because that's kind of what PvE is in a sense, but maybe adding more variation or just spicing it up a little bit. I don't know how they want to do that, because they didn't really speak on how exactly they wanted to do that, but just know that they're thinking about it, alright? They're thinking about y'all PvEers out there. So for Layer 3, the layout is going to be kind of similar to like an open server area like Layer 1, which is the depths, if y'all don't know that. And you could travel to these open server areas through instance areas. It's a little confusing, but here's a professionally drawn photo from the big dog Rag to help you visualize it.
But the idea would be like, you know, you travel out from these like individual locations into these like smaller instance locations, and they could be like, they're meant to kind of like be like travel between the big zones, but the small ones are instanced, and you can end up going the wrong way. You could accidentally loop back to the entrance if you don't know where you're going. But every time one of these squares is next to each other, it's like that would be, you could exit that side and you'll go into that next zone. So that's kind of how it all
And basically, the key things are this is going to be a much more randomization and a much higher danger level than the last few layers, because obviously the biggest issue with layer 2 is the fact that you do it 3 times, 4 times, even less for some people, and you've already got it down to a T. There's not really anything like new that you're encountering every single time, but they're planning on adding some more randomization and probably bumping up that skill level a little bit. So you're gonna have to go in with a lot of people, maybe not a lot, but you know, a good amount of people, a whole squad, gonna have some comms going on. I'm picturing it right now. I think it's gonna be pretty cool. And then also things like the Central Luminant and Void Sea updates are going to be in the future, but they're not really on the main board right now. They were mostly confirmed, but obviously they're not on the roadmap, so probably going to be quite a long time until we see any of those things. And then the final main thing they talked about was the introduction of more lore into the game. And the whole goal is to make the player feel more immersed into the game, which is why we're getting like new animations, because the game felt too stiff before. It just wasn't as modern as Raguzer wanted it to be. And what is insane is that they are hoping to introduce more player-influenced events and maybe even boss fights. So player-influenced events are kind of like where the player and their like effect on the world is actually going to impact the community in some way or some form, which we're already seeing with the Authority Origin by climbing the ranks and stuff, which unlocks new dialogue and overall just new stuff to do in the game. And several of the devs also talked about potentially recruiting those lore characters or becoming a part of the lore itself. Now, becoming a part of the lore itself, probably more for separate people, maybe the devs themselves, but when it comes to recruiting lore characters, I think that's a super, super cool idea. Maybe like fighting, they gave an example of fighting Lord Regent with like Maestro, or like you have to unlock Maestro and be able to fight with them to be able to fight Lord Regent, if that makes any sense. And also, both War Master and Chef Oath were confirmed. Agamotsu's working on the Chef Oath, so who knows, maybe it could be sneaky busted when it comes out. Also, the Authority Origin had so much hype for it, so now we're going to be likely seeing new origins coming out, not in the near future, but over time. And the ones listed were the Vigil's Origin, Summer Company Origin, and maybe even the Hive Origin. So I think those are always going to be really cool. New origins just spices up gameplay. I think if they're done the same way as the Authority Origin, it's going to be insanely cool. So yeah, overall, those were the main things being said. You guys can let me know your thoughts in the comments, but there were also a ton of sneak peeks as well. So, for example, here we have a leaked model, or a remodel, I guess, for the Dread Serpent, which looks pretty cool. And then a potential Gale Odachi made by Natoons. They were talking about that. And more too in paths like Magma, Sand, or Rust. Those were the ones like talked about. I think that's pretty cool. A Magma path? Now, that's kind of crazy. So in the end, I think this might be the most up Deepwoken's ever been. And I personally feel like the game is and will continue to get more fun to play after the dry season that we just had. I think this is just good looks, man. Good looks for the future of Deepwoken. And as always, I'll leave a link to the official stream, so you can feel free to check that out, watch the entire thing, as this was just kind of like the real breakdown for it. And I'll see y'all next time. Peace.